Welcome back to the Successful Survivors podcast. We are so glad you're here. We are your tribe. We are real, we are raw, and you know what? We are funny. You know that we are, all of us successful survivors. We're goofy in a wonderful sort of way. So we're glad that you're here today because we have a very important topic to talk about. And Dawn is going to tell us what it is, largely because I can't remember. So go ahead, Dawn.
We're going to talk about coping with hard things, replacing coping strategies with healthy ones. And as I was getting ready for this, I kept saying coping skills because that just kind of makes sense, right? We don't hear coping strategies, but skills means you're trying to develop that. Strategies you can develop and you can change, right? And sometimes they just kind of happen. So skills you kind of have to develop. So, anyway, I got the mind shift, and I don't know if anybody else is doing it, but that's what I got for you. So as I was preparing for this today, I was just thinking of 3 different things we could talk about and kind of discuss. And then obviously if it goes in a different direction, then it does. That's what we do. We just improvise, right? Diana's the queen of improvisation over there. So this episode today is about that. And while trying to survive childhood trauma, these 3 things came to my mind. What powerful strategies did we create to help us survive from trauma as a child? 2, are you still using this coping skill or strategy? If so, how is it serving you? Was it serving you then and now? How can you replace 3? How can you replace unhealthy coping strategies with healthy ones? So that's kind of the outline, unless we come up with something else. But to start off with, what powerful coping strategy did we create to help survive through trauma as a child? So I'm gonna go first, kind of give an example. So I created an imaginary friend. I had one. I used it. I did things, karate chopped and talked, and I think that was my way as an adult. I think it was my way to process and have something that I could do and kind of, avoid, kind of, get out of that and to kind of escape for a little bit, right? When things are hard, where the first thing is to do is run, right? Escape and get away from it, because we don't know how to deal with it. And we've said in a few episodes that as a child, we don't have that emotional language, that way to actually process, because our brains aren't processed, right? And some of the trauma, right, is shocking enough. And then your child, brings on a whole nother level. And so up until literally, actually, no, I'm going to stop there. So that's up until literally, I guess I'll go. Until then, until literally last year, I wanted to get rid of it. I tried to pray it out of me. I tried to fast and go, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something else. It was not effective until I embraced it. That okay, this is what I do. And I'll share some more stuff as we go, but I want to hear from you, Rhonda. What is a coping strategy that you developed, maybe younger or teenagers, wherever you want to start?
Okay, so I had 3. I'm so glad that you asked that, Dawn. That I didn't even think of that, of my childhood coping strategies. But with you bringing that up, man, it just took me right back. So number 1, performance. I had to do something to earn approval. And I would go cut the grass, or I would look around and find something that I could do that hopefully would earn me either a little reprieve in the chaos and dysfunction that happened around me all the time, or a little pat on the back. And I just lived for that. The number 2, I would say, is the redirect. I learned how to redirect the conversation right after I learned how to speak. I could, if things were going really, really wrong at the house, I would say, did you see what they were doing over there at the Hells Angels house? Did you see what's going on over there? And then the argument would temporarily pause as, they had to go outside and see what was going on at the Hells Angels house that was 3 doors down. And I realized very early on that worked for the people I was around. So I became like, I could probably teach the art of the redirect at Quantico. And then probably my number one coping skill to this day is reading. I learned very early that if I was reading a book, they left me alone. So I read the entire set of encyclopedias that was in the house, along with the Bible that was there. I thought it was just a history book. And I still...
Wait. Did you just say an encyclopedia came in a book form? I just want to clarify for listeners.
All right, listen, lady. Listen, lady.
Okay, continue.
Britannica, the world books, man.
Right? Next time you're in Washington, D.C., Amber, go to the Smithsonian. I'm sure they have, it's like a matching set of books. Oh my gosh, I'm 120. Yeah. So they all matched and I read them all. And yeah. And still to this day, if I'm stressed out, if I'm really tired, if you name it, any excuse that I can find for sitting in my reading chair that's right there and being left alone and just read a book, it's the best thing on earth for me. So that's me.
Right, Amber, can we hear from you next?
Yeah, absolutely. I love this topic, and starting with reflecting back on what we used in our childhood, because you asked me for data a lot of times, and so I think about that and how as children we are using it to our advantage and for really good reasons. So being not criticizing what we used as a child, even if we know it's unhealthy now, we were using it to adapt, and how cool and savvy children can be to be able to manage things. And so kind of applauding and giving ourselves grace for finding a way to protect ourselves when we didn't have somebody who could do that for us. It's a really powerful thing. So not criticizing ourselves with that, because 2/3 of those who report experiencing at least one traumatic experience by 16 years. So let me say that in simple words. By the age of 16, 2/3 of people have experienced at least one trauma. And so the numbers are really, really high. And remember, the people who started in that type of data are now adults. So these are the adults that we're looking at that report this, and including the kids. So I was one of those. The sisters here in this group and a lot of the listeners are at least one. That's 2/3, the majority of people. So that normalizing it a little bit. And then one other data that I thought was kind of relevant to this topic when you brought it up, Dawn, is that in the past year, on a yearly average, about 1 in 7 children experience some type of child abuse or neglect. That has nothing to do with the data of going into child welfare or engaging services or anything like that. It's just that 1 in 7 in a year experience child abuse or neglect. And so that's a lot of us. And it's very, very common. So we might see these behaviors and these coping skills that I used as a normal day-to-day with those we interact with, because it's a lot of us. And we have brothers and sisters who support us with those. So for me, I was a big avoider. I would go isolate myself or check out or leave people and just stay by myself, because that was the safest place to not have to be around other people that I couldn't manage or I felt fearful of. So that was a big one for me. I was a people pleaser. I would do whatever I was told to do to avoid the risk of possibly getting in trouble or having a stereotype or being accused of something, which I can't say that always worked, no matter how much I did it, but at least the probability felt better. I felt safer if I did that. And then I personalized everything. They could have been talking about the kid, 3 states over and 5 doors down, and I still took it personal. It was always about me. What can I do to fix that problem? What can I do to prevent this crisis? So I personalized everything. I was So I the word that we use in the clinical level, so some people might hear this word of disassociation, where we kind of check out from the emotions that you talked about, Dawn, when you said imagination or invisible. Sometimes they just don't feel like you're there. I disassociated in the way of I would just avoid and check out from things. So I'll talk a little more as it comes up of some of the terminology that we will hear in the general populations as we talk about our coping skills and using that language with it. But in simple language, I just put myself in a place where I felt safe, which wasn't always safe for my emotional well-being.
That's a really good way to do that.
Yeah. Wow. Yep. I would have to say I personalize everything too. Still do that sometimes, but yes. Diana, can we hear from you, please?
Yes. So coping skills or coping strategies. As a child, what I was writing these things down earlier, I would have to go into my house anytime I was in my house, maybe I came from school and I walked in the house, I assess. I'm quiet. I assess. I read the room. I absorb the room. If that room is heavy, if it is dead silence in my house as a child, when I walked in, I was in trouble. I was getting in trouble. If I walked into my room, it was going to be a mess because maybe I left shoes on the floor. Maybe they were nailed to the floor because I left them out. So then, the best thing to do then is to nail them to the floor, or hard eye roll. Or if there was something, wrong with my shelf, then the whole shelf would be cleared. So I knew there was something going on if it was dead silent. So I learned to assess. With that, I also learned to think ahead. So if I knew that there was going to be something in the evening coming for me, my dad was an alcoholic, so maybe he went out that night. This is where the planning ahead came in, where I might have set up my animals. I talk about these other stories that I had where if I knew my dad would be coming for me later that evening, I would set up my animals so he would trip and fall and then make a bunch of noise, try and wake up the rest of the house, try and wake me up. So I planned ahead. Other things I did though, when it was just a regular day, I just stayed out of the way, or I would volunteer to help. Or this is something I have perfected in my life. I still use to this day. It is find the interest of the person that is having the most stress in the room and find out what makes them important and ask them something about that thing, because people like to talk about themselves. And if the person is angry, if the person is frustrated, if the person has anxiety, and I'm asking something about maybe something that he's good at his job, that he's recognized, or that award that he just got. Oh my gosh, I heard that you got an award, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, oh my God. It takes them from here, this level, down to here. And now they're friendly and they're talking. So, it's that kind of thing. I've learned to master that in my life today. When anybody around me is super stressed out, I want to know what makes them feel good about themselves. And then I just kind of go that direction. I don't know how you want to go into this, Dawn. I know that we were originally talking about what do you do what were the coping skills that you developed as a child, and do you still use those today? The ones I just mentioned I use today. Did you always use those through middle school, through high school, and early 20s? No. Then I learned other things. I learned about alcohol. And then I learned about that really makes me numb, and that helped me through high school in my head. All it helped me do was disappear, right? It didn't help anything. The problems are still there.
Diana, can I say something on that?
Yes, please.
Thank you for being vulnerable about that and normalizing that sometimes those coping skills, we use it with a good intention, even if it's not healthy. And there's a lot of research that says there's a concurrence with when we've experienced trauma or abuse like we all have, and addictions, substance abuse, things where that was the coping skill that was adapted, maybe not in early childhood like we were originally talking about, but exactly like you said. So I just want to say, I think there are a lot of people who feel what you're saying.
Yeah, through middle school, through high school. I, barely remember high school, and then early 20s. And then but we just did our last podcast about no being a complete sentence and that boundaries keeping us safe. I will tell you this, the coping skills that I used from middle school through high school and early 20s did not keep me safe. It did not, tears, it exacerbated the very problem. Sorry, I cried. That was in my childhood. So, wow. Anyhow, didn't know the tears would come, or did I? We all know I cry on every podcast, just about. But I feel like saying yield back to you, Dawn. I will yield back.
Thank you for sharing, and Amber said, thank you for being vulnerable. I think that's the whole point of doing this, right? Is to kind of weave a path for others to feel comfortable to talk about their stuff too, right? So somebody's going to talk about that uncomfortable stuff and first. And I feel like that's kind of what we're doing. I would have to say I have some of the similar things that you guys mentioned. I also did. One thing that I did and unfortunately still do is eating. Actually, when I was growing up until I was 18, I was not allowed to go to the fridge. By myself to get a snack if I was hungry or to get something to drink. I ate 3 square meals a day, and I sat at the table and Grandma had her plates fixed, and that's what I ate. And then I got up, put my plate there, and I left. So when I think I shared this in another podcast that when I got older, I was like, I'm going to buy the food. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have all this food. I can go in my fridge whenever I want. And, I soon realized I can't eat all the food in one night because I won't have it for the rest of the week. So, I stopped doing that, obviously. But I think that, I guess I want to bring up what Amber said too, is that we did what we had to do to cope and to get through it because it was that hard. It was like we couldn't process it. We couldn't. I actually did the opposite. I would identify who I was to people. I would say, by the way, before you get to know me too well, I've been abused. I've been in foster care. Just throwing that out there because I don't want you to be my friend, get to know me, and then decide you're crazy. I mean, I kind of am, but I own it now. So I just wanted to let you know that ahead of time. I don't do that anymore. Obviously we're talking about it, so I can do it today, but I don't generally do that anymore. So the thing I wanted to get into next is...
Hey, Dawn.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm oh my gosh, you have so much in what you're saying. I'm like, we could talk about that. We could talk about that because the struggle is real on all of those things. When you said the word, I was crazy, that's something I did. I labeled myself like that all the time because there was a lot of mental illness in my family and they would point that to me and say, she's crazy, you're crazy. And I have to be very cautious now how I use that word and what that word really means because I used it as a negative for myself in the past. And it's not necessarily a negative thing, but the connotation behind what we say often, and I would say most of the time, reflects how that word was used when we were a child. So I appreciate you saying that.
You guys don't all know me yet, but I didn't mean that to feel anything. My crazy, I guess I should identify it, or definition for it was, I just do things abnormally. Like I don't do it normally. I'm out of the box thinker. I'm like, the path is this way. I'm going in all different directions, trying to reel it back to the same path that you're doing. So that's what I mean by my crazy is more, I just don't do things normally how people do them.
It's a compliment. Yes. That's what I was saying is I love how you changed it from the perspective as a child when it was there to now. I think that's really cool.
Okay. I just wanted our listeners to not think that I was trying to be sensitive, I'm being overly sensitive, but I don't overanalyze ever. That's not something I do.
I feel like you
kidding,
just did. For being honest, I feel like you just did.
I know, right?
So her sarcasm, oh, I could listen to that forever.
Same.
And then, because it makes a wonderful opportunity to give some more good jokes back. So,
Oh yeah. And I really should, if you ever go on a comedy show, I really could do that with you, Amber. Like I set you up all the time. So okay, we're gonna move on. Rhonda and Amber, did you guys get to identify not identify, but still using those coping skills and how they served you? Now, I don't think that you guys got to talk about that yet. Diana started.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't do the redirect as much. I don't have to, but I think if I was in a tense situation, a trauma situation, I don't know, somebody's trying to carjack me or whatever, I would probably go, oh, look, a cop. I mean, I might just automatically, just dial right back into, like riding a bike and hope that skill was right there and would serve me. But the other thing, performance and read, absolutely. When I'm stressed, I throw myself into work. When I'm happy, I throw myself into work. When I don't feel well, I throw myself into work. I work. Performance. I work. I'm a worker breed human. I'm like a German shepherd of humans, just looking for the work that needs to be done. So yes, I still do it. It's who I am. I'm wired for it. I make no apologies. What about you, Amber?
Hold on really quick. German Shepherd is the great breed that you picked.
Love the German Shepherd dog. I'm not a companion dog. I'm not a lap dog. I'm a throw that stick, throw it. Come on, throw it. Let's go. That's me. Yeah.
And they're loyal. And you said last podcast that loyalty is important, or not last one, but one of the podcasts. So they're loyal and go. Yep. Mm-hmm. That was
die for you. Throw myself in front of a car to push you out of the way. That's yeah. What about you, Amber? Are you still using?
I'm just thinking about what Christmas card I'm going to get you for. It's going to have a German Shepherd on it.
Yes.
And you're not going to dog me at all about what I send.
Ooh, it's very wonderful. Oh my God.
Yes, Amber, go ahead.
So,
if you want to speak on what you do now and how it serves you.
Yeah, definitely. So being a person that I in the avoidance part, I was very observant of things. And so you ladies know I'm still very observant. I take in a lot of things and I adapt to that. I read people as much as I read books, Rhonda. And I just read people a lot. And it is a gift actually that I get to use in a lot of my work is my intuition of being able to read people. At times though, I can adapt to the point where I'm trying to please the person instead of what I'm supposed to be doing. And I get focused on more about other people than myself. I'm very easy to do that or take on a lot of responsibilities because I want to people please, and then I become overwhelmed and I see the effects of that. And as I said earlier, personalizing everything, I have to work very conscientiously. At times, it depends on how much my stress is, but just not taking everything personal about me. And so I will refer a resource for that. If you have heard of the 4 Agreements book, you can also listen to it on audio. It is a very wise man of information. I would highly recommend people to get that resource. Like I said, it's audio, it's book, but one of the 4 agreements is to not take anything personal. And it's identifying that other people are reflecting to me because of how they are experiencing things in their life. So it allows me to not take everything personal because it's really not about me. It's about the speaker and they're of value too, but it allows me to detach a little bit in a healthy way because some detachment is healthy and it allows me to set that boundary like we were talking about last week. So I can get into a spiral down of any of those real easy because I go back to that natural resource from my childhood. And as I've gotten older, I've gotten more aware of it. But there are times that I have to catch myself. The simple word I would say is I acknowledge it. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for making it simple. I sometimes complicate it, but I want it to be simple. So you do that very well.
I also say that life is simply complicated. So.
That is good. That is good. I mean, I'll, I'm killing myself over here. Because I'm sitting there looking at my notes and I'm going, okay, yep, I still do that one. Yep, I still do that one. The one I said earlier that I still do, which is find that, when I see the stressful situation, I make sure to find out what their interest is, what blah, blah, blah. And I have them do that. The other thing I do is work out, take a walk, go to the gym, or do something, I have a gym in my house, so I might go in there and just like put on, I don't know, trash TV, which is reality TV. I love it. Guilty pleasure. I said it out loud. It is what it is. But I'll put that on and and I will do some kind of workout because it releases those endorphins, right? It helps. That is a great coping strategy for me. Or I bake, or I do something, which is something for someone else. So I might bake chocolate chip cookies for Jeff's mom. That makes me happy. And so something like that. But these are things I take on. And I actually, when we go to close, there are 11 really quick bullet points of identifying things and what a bad coping skill or strategy looks like to a healthy one. And I really, when we get to that point, whenever you want to wrap it up and we get to that point, I'd really like to share that because some of these I do. I didn't realize I did them, but I do. So yeah, when we get there.
No, I love it. That's number 3. So yes. yes. So I would just say the other thing that I do besides the imaginary friend thing is I make things bigger than what it is, what they are, situations what they are. Like they're and I feel like my anxiety is all, since it's so loud in my head, everyone else can hear it. Everyone else can see it, everyone else can feel it. In reality, I'm learning that is not true. I may look like I'm calm on the outside. I'm like, what? So I've learned that I'm like, okay, so if no one else can see it, I don't have to go talk about it and say, I'm nervous, I'm this, I'm that, and the other thing. I can just within myself go, okay, Dawn, why are you anxious? Kind of walk yourself down, right? Why are you anxious? What's making you anxious? What do you need to acknowledge and not avoid? What does that look like? Do you need to take a breather? Do you need to go for a walk or whatnot? So I would have to say that is serving me not well. And the imaginary friend thing that what I was gonna share with that was, I feel like people do that. And for me, I've learned that it helps me. It doesn't help me, but it makes me avoid things. And a few things that I wanted to mention that it makes me avoid is sitting with painful memories or any memories really. Looking at my needs because others have more greater needs than I do, and taking responsibility for my healing. And so I think when we identify it, once we're able to identify what those coping skills are or strategies, if they're serving, if they're not serving, why are they not serving? What are they helping? What do we need to learn from them to continue moving forward? Yes, Amber.
I just love how you're saying this. You said the word identifying like 5 times, and you're so vulnerable in that moment. And just the word identify, I think that's a key starting point for everybody. A framework is there's power in just identifying maybe an emotion or a physical feeling, because sometimes in the trauma, we can't put an emotion to it. We can't put the words to it, but we notice how we feel or how we respond. And there's such power, Dawn, for all of us in just identifying it and being curious to what is this? Do I like it? Do I not? Do I want to keep it? Do I not? And just coming to name it as something in our lives is such a powerful way to take our power back from things we were victimized from. So I just wanted to note that. Very powerful.
No, thank
Very
you.
cool.
See, I'm crying now too, Diana. It's not just you. It must be the D's. D's day to cry because we both start with D. So thank you. And I don't know how much more to talk about that. So I'm going to move on to the next part. So number 3 was, how can you replace unhealthy coping strategies for healthier ones? And I think we kind of already touched on that, right? Identifying what it is first, right? And I want to go to your, I love it. Oh, Rhonda, you didn't get to talk yet.
Oh, I've been
Do
talking
you
all
have
day.
anything to add?
Okay, so, well, one thing I'll add to what you just said, Amber, what I noticed about what you said, Dawn, you said, I'm sitting here and I wrote a note. I said, coping strategy for overthinking, question mark, question mark, question mark. Because I was trying to listen for, so what's the coping strategy for overthinking? And I heard you say self-talk. And you know, as always happens with me, then I derail and I don't know what you said after that, because I was still on self-talk. But I was thinking about how when I was young and just recently emancipated out of foster care, I think it was about the time that Tony Robbins' first book came out, and I started reading Zig Ziglar and Dr. Norman Vincent Peale and Stephen Covey and Brian Tracy and Dennis Waitley and Tony Robbins. And I started reading all that. And one of the things that I took out of that was self-talk. And I had this, and maybe we all do this, I don't know, but the words in my head about myself came from other people who just didn't realize how amazing I was. So the words in my head were not good. And I just automatically assimilated those words. Like, I'm white trash street girl, came, you know, because I came from the street. Well, that has a whole other connotation to it. But when I was a little girl, I thought I was a white trash street girl. Not any sexual connotation or anything, but that's what I thought I was. That's what I was told I was. So I believed that I was.
More like gutter girl.
Gutter girl is probably a better way to put it. Yeah. And so then when I started reading all of that, you know, positive thinking, success thinking, I read Success Magazine from cover to cover. It was a lot about the things that we say to ourselves, and the psychology, for example, of athletes, with coaches, with athletes, getting them to not only say, I'm going to win, but visualize winning, visualize specific actions that it takes in order to win. And I just started doing that. And everybody knows I'm not an athlete. I never have been. I never will be. But I translated those skills over to business. So I knew what I had to do in order to win. And it was all about winning. And I became a winner. And I was told myself I was a winner. Winner, winner, chicken dinner, self-talk. And then pretty soon I couldn't work for anybody else anymore. I had to open my own company because I just wanted to just win all the time. And so that worked out. That whole self-talk thing worked out pretty well for me. I'll just say that. How about that? So I'm glad you said self-talk.
I didn't. I said it in like all the wordiness that I always do, and you guys summarize it. So it's beautiful.
Well, just from the time the words left your ear, left your mouth, and they got into my ear, that's a whole lot happened. I don't even know exactly what you said. This is what happened in my head. Oh yeah, self-talk. That's right. Yeah.
Beautiful. Love it.
I love how you showed in that, Rhonda, that our weaknesses, which we perceive as weaknesses now, when we look back at our childhood, like that's something that was maybe not healthy for me then, are and can often be our greatest gifts. Our greatest weaknesses then are tuned to be our greatest gifts when we use them in the right way. So as we're acknowledging, oh, there is a correlation between what I did as a child. I've been there. I'm still there some days that I do now as an adult. Do it with that mindfulness or that thought of, this can be a great thing now. I am gifted in this because I was there.
I'm so glad that you said that. And Dawn, I know you have 17 other points. I can't help but say it. I have to say this real quick. That's what my book Successful Survivors is all about, these character traits, because the very things that maybe we've been criticized for, like for example, if you ever got criticized for, oh, you're such a nag, you nag all the time, you just can't let anything go. Okay, that's tenacity, and that's a highly valuable and transferable character trait. You take tenacity and put that into sales and marketing, and boom, winner. There's just so many things that came from that, from the pain of our childhood, like courage, determination, patience, understanding that it takes time to do things. And, that I could just go on and on about all these character traits that most survivors have and all successful survivors have. And so, yes, we have to look at these things from our childhood and then flip it. I always say we just need to disable the labels and use these things to our advantage. That's how you win.
That's right. And I'm sorry, Dawn, I got one more thing on that, because I was thinking of Diana's thing there too. After she drops the microphone, well, we can have a silent moment. Okay, moving back, because that's uncomfortable for the comfortable. But so the other thing I was going to say is sometimes we can't put words to it. Like if I was a listener right now, I'm a very private person. It's funny because I'm an extrovert, but I'm very, very private and very reserved. That's how I feel the most safe, right? And sometimes I'm like, okay, they're saying they talked to somebody, they're saying they heard these things, or they vented to somebody and now they're talking about it on this. That's totally not me. I'm not going to speak about this. I don't even know what to say. I don't even know what I feel. I just want to normalize that for a second and talk about how sometimes we can use these different coping skills that are healthy in such awesome ways. Like Diana, you're exercising. That is a way that's relieving those both chemical and physical, and depending on how you talk to yourself while you're doing that, the psychological effects of these things. I journaled and wrote some terrible poems, both literally and metaphorically of what it said, but I wrote all the time, writing down how you feel in the most authentic way that you can of your mind, or I call it vomit writing. Some people do it through music. They sing or they play an instrument and they just feel it when they do it. Some arts, people who have experienced trauma and they do arts with their hand, or they're writing or drawing or clay, that in itself, there's a way through that we can work towards healing ourselves and using those are great coping skills when you can't put words to it. And I never want to diminish the value of that, because I didn't tell people I wrote. You might not have known how much physical exercise you did, Diana, growing up as a coping skill, but you probably adapted to that then. And that's why you do it now in a healthier, knowing way. But those are so essential.
It's funny you say that. So when I developed that, the exercise part, and I don't know if it was, as a little girl, we had a cul-de-sac. We lived on a cul-de-sac, dual cul-de-sac, so it only had one single loaded street. And that's a real estate term. So anyhow,
Thanks for clarifying.
Was not loaded. Just to clarify.
That's right.
It had houses only on one side.
That's right. So, but I would run down to my friend's house. So I was active. I was active as a kid. But in high school, when I was doing that last win that I talk about, where I kind of foiled that last crime, if you will, with my dad, I did it because I had been working out every day with my friend John. and in his garage, and I got my legs just so strong. And that's like, if you're going to be working out, you got to get they carry the most weight. They carry all of you, you know what I mean? Other than your neck, right? Because with the head, but you really, really, that was important to me. So I had my legs really strong. And so I knew I could do anything with strong legs. You can run fast with strong legs. You can lift, you can throw someone off if you need to, which I did, and you can do those things. And that's when I knew in my head that it was beneficial for me to be strong physically. And then that, of course, then, I guess the domino effect of that is then you are strong mentally because you get confidence, and then, it grows all of the things.
That's good.
Yeah. All right, now we have an awkward silence, so somebody has to say something. I do like the vomit writing, though. I like the vomit writing. I wrote that down. Journal, vomit writing. I'm about ready to write a really good vomit letter, if you know what I'm saying.
I've done many of those too, and burnt them, or just ripped them up, shredded them. It's like a scissors and just cut them all up and throw them away. Yep. Because I didn't want anybody to see it. Because I'm like, no, this is not for anybody else's eyes, and it would hurt people's feelings, right? All that kind of stuff. So, I guess I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to do a couple things, and then Diane, I want to end with you or any other last thoughts from each of you. Okay. We already talked about identifying and naming it. I'm just learning last few years or so that you can't work on something you don't know or identify. Like if you can't name it, then you don't know what it is. You don't know what the weapons that you need or the skills or strategies or whatever to take on that. Owning it. Right? Don't just say, oh, that's someone else's story. I'm really good at going, oh, this can be someone else's story. That's somebody else deals with that. I don't really know what that is. So owning it and learning that it's part of your story and embracing it. And like giving yourself grace, like Amber has mentioned earlier. And then Rhonda's always saying it. She said it today, but learn from it, right? Don't go back to it and just sit there and cry and feel sorry for yourself. Maybe do that for like 2 seconds, right? And then, okay, what do I need to learn, right? And then be intentional, because if you don't, it's going to be a default, right? It's going to be a default. We're going to default to everything that we always do. But being intentional, saying, okay, I'm feeling this, I'm doing this. This is what I normally do. That's not really been helping. So what are some other things? And so hopefully, as we've gone through this, you've gotten a little bit of a list, and maybe you find things like Diana said, I didn't even know I was doing these, but I do. So we're going to get to your list because I'm excited about it. And then, or if anybody have a couple more words they want to say real quick, and then we can end with your list, Diana. Rhonda, do you have anything else?
No, I want to hear Diana's list. I want to leave everybody with really specific coping strategies. Because I know there were times in my life when if somebody would have said, oh, let's talk about coping strategies for your life, I don't know. I would have just been like, yeah, okay, you go and do that. I'm not interested. Because I think some people are so immersed in their painful situation. Maybe they're still not in the abusive situation, but we all know, all of us successful survivors know that we have a higher rate of depression. We have a higher rate of suicide or feelings of suicide. We have a higher rate of substance abuse disorder. Why? Because we're self-medicating to try to ease the pain. We have horrible rates of being in toxic relationships and domestic violence, living in poverty. I mean, and on, health problems, physical problems, mental health problems. And, it can feel so incredibly overwhelming. I mean, I remember times in my life when if somebody, my best friend from the time we were 14, she would say, what's wrong? I'd be like, sit down. Do you have 2 hours? It wasn't one thing, right? It's a million things because and they're all like tangled together. And so I think for the person who's feeling that, like there's just not enough time to even break down what the problems are. And there are so many, they can't even really sort one from the next. And they can't even figure out, how do you even get out of this? Then you have that feeling of overwhelm and hopelessness and powerlessness. For that person, if this is you right now and you're listening to us, I want you to hear what Diana has to say and write it down. Get a piece of paper, get a pen, rewind it, listen to it over and over and over again. And I'm going to make sure to put it in the show notes, because if you do the wrong thing that makes you feel better in the moment, because you're trying to cope with all the, I'm just going to say it, with the shit storm that you're in, if you do the wrong thing, it's going to make it worse. You can do things that are completely irrevocable. You can do things you can't recover from. Diana's going to give you some suggestions for what you can do that will help you make things better. It might only be an inch better, but tomorrow you do another inch, and the next day you do another inch, and you keep going. And that's how we're all here right now. None of us snapped our fingers and everything was fine. It takes patience, and I'm glad that you're here, and I hope you come back and listen to every other podcast, because you're why we're doing this. Amber's exhausted. She didn't get any sleep last night. We all have like all this other stuff, but we're here. We're doing this because of you. So Diana, your turn.
Thank you. All of those things were amazing. So number one, you cannot change what you don't acknowledge. That I wanted to start with to say, because, we can acknowledge, I think all of us, that we don't have the best coping strategies all the time, right? So here's going to be 11 items. Number one, identify the triggers. So a bad coping strategy is ignoring, denying the root cause of whatever that stress is. A healthy coping is acknowledge, identify the triggers that are causing that particular stress. That's number one. Number two, deep breathing, relaxation techniques. Bad coping would be smoking, excessive drinking, overeating. Healthy coping, practice deep breathing, a meditation of any kind. It doesn't have to be, 30-minute meditation, 2-minute meditation, just a quick breathe, relaxing, progressive muscle relaxation. Number three, physical exercise. It's kind of, you know what that is. Bad coping is just sitting there, excessive sleeping, sedentary activities, basically sitting on the couch, sitting on your big bum. Healthy coping is engage in some kind of regular physical exercise that, again, relieves or boosts those endorphins that we want to see and improves that mood, like immediately improves the mood. I mean, immediately. That's like super, super important, obviously. Number four, expressive writing. Talked about that vomit writing, but that expressive writing. So the bad would be bottling up all of those emotions and never, ever letting them out. A healthy coping skill is you keep a journal. You express the thoughts and feelings. Number five, positive self-talk. So the bad coping would be negative self-talk and, just really getting down on yourself and talking bad about yourself, because I'm telling you, when you give the devil that opportunity, when you say things out loud, he will capitalize on that and make you feel a certain way. Healthy coping, you challenge those negative thoughts, you replace them with a positive affirmation of yourself. You can change how your brain and rewire your brain when you do that. Every single time you have that stressful moment and you're having that negative self-talk, the second you replace it with a positive self-talk, you are changing that memory in your brain. You're changing going forward. Seeking support. So bad coping, isolating yourself. hiding from friends and family. Healthy coping, talk to friends, family, a mental health professional for support if you need that. Number 7, time management. Me, I'm horrible. I procrastinate. I do all that kind of stuff. So a healthier one for me will be to break my tasks. Not number 1, don't overbook the flight, but break them into smaller, manageable steps. Prioritize those steps. Number 8, hobbies, some leisure activities. So bad coping is engaging in unhealthy distractions. We talked about what those might be, right? You're drinking, you're partying, you're doing those. Those are unhealthy distractions. Pursue hobbies and activities that bring you joy. Maybe it's doing cooking for my mother-in-law. Maybe it's, going and helping my friend because she's moving. Whatever that healthy activity, whatever brings you joy will also relax you in the long run.
I will try the food you make for your mother-in-law. That's my hope, my healthy. Okay, continue on. Yes.
Yes. Number 9, actually, those are only 10, not 11. So number 9 is setting boundaries. We talked about that in the last podcast. Number 7, go to that podcast. It's a great podcast. Bad coping would be overcommitting, overbook that flight, like I was talking about, spreading yourself too thin. Set that boundary. Learn to say no. No is a complete sentence, like we talked about at the last podcast. Set realistic boundaries. And number 10, gratitude practice. This one is so key because the bad coping is focusing on what's lacking. I don't have this. I don't have enough money. You whine and complain and whatever. Practice on just being grateful you can open your eyes in the morning. Be grateful you can take that step, to the kitchen to grab something, even if it's a piece of toast or a glass of water. Be grateful. Be appreciative for what you have in the know. And remember, change is gradual. It is not something that happens overnight. These things need to be practiced on the daily. And as always, I always want to say, if there are challenges that are deeper than these 10 things that I've said, seek professional help. Find a support system. Find someone that, is a viable option for you. And it might not be the first counselor you talk to. It might be 2, 3, 4 down the road, but never stop trying. So those are my tips, my 10 tips.
Those are
I love your 10 tips.
Yay.
I also want to second, I'll come test food too.
What now?
When you make food for your mother-in-law, I will come test. I will be there.
Yes.
Awesome.
So,
Perfect.
thank you ladies for just being a part of this. I struggled a little bit during it, but I continued. That's what we also do, right? We just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And you ladies, that's the part of supporting, right? Like you guys supported me. You guys had my back because you guys had stuff to talk about too, right? So just I hope that this is encouraging. I hope this was give you some hope, and that you, even though we've gone through hard things, we can pick ourselves back up. Maybe we have to start it though, right? People can't help us if they don't know. So be vulnerable with finding that person that you're safe with. We were all able to be a little bit vulnerable today because we've all know each other a little bit. We don't know each other real well, but we know each other and we've been vulnerable already. And as I think Amber was saying it, I think all of us said it at one point, but I think vulnerability can be a weakness, or it can be also a greatest strength, right? When we're willing to say, you know what, I'm choosing to do that, right? When people were taking advantage of us, that was vulnerable, but we didn't choose that. But we can choose to say, you know what, you don't have any more power over me, and I want to speak this out because I want to own my story and I want to help others. So thank you for being a part of this, and we hope that you come back.
All right. See you next time.